find a problem, understand the problem. Don't bring up your solution. Just talk to as many potential customers as possible without bringing up what you do.
Daniel from Withe is awesome. Me and Mony had a great conversation with him, how he started the company, why he started the company, and a little bit more about his personal journey into startups, along with some unexpected, very serendipitous moments throughout his career that definitely helped him find success. So stay tuned. I think you're going to love it.
When I talk to software salespeople who had to book demos to meet someone before they could sell their product, when I explained to them that our product says, hey, you can chat with a real person on your website right now, they were blown away. Going back to design, our very first iteration, click to instant video. Like it literally was click and you are in a call. And that was great, but nobody was expecting that. Nobody wanted to do that. And so we actually learned that the fastest way to get someone on video call was the worst way, because as soon as they were in a call, they were like, what the hell is going on? It's like Omegle or whatever, chat roulette. It's like, whoa, someone's right there. So we're like, okay, how do we make it fast, but also prepare people that they actually are getting on a call? So there's a bit of a form, there's like a pre-screen now. And so I think that's what some of the design lessons we learned is like, the fastest way is not often the best way.
Can you think of any specific advice that you give to other founders, like just starting out?
Don't get stuck on a solution. So many founders, they have this insight. And they're like, oh my God, I've had this epiphany. I'm going to do this. They lock in, and it's great to be focused on what you're doing, but you're almost, I'm not going to say you're never, but you're almost never right on your first shot. I mean, hey, we're still not right on our third shot, and we're constantly figuring out what works. So talk to potential customers, talk to your current customers, and build for what their actual problems are.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to chat and learn more about what you got going on over at Withe.
Yeah, great to be here and excited to chat with you guys.
Cool. If you don't mind, maybe giving the audience a 30-second intro about you, about your business that you're building, and then we can get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm Daniel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Withe. We are a hiring event platform for volume and seasonal hiring teams. That's a little bit about us. I can get into all of that. And I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, for the uninitiated, just north of Seattle on the West Coast.
Thank you so much. So maybe we can start with a little bit of that origin story. I love kind of understanding the why before the how and all of that fun stuff. Can you tell us briefly why you decided to start Withe in the first place? Like, why did you dedicate all of this time, effort, and energy to build this company?
Yeah, so we've gone through two pretty big pivots from when we first started. So the why of what we do right now is very different from the why of when we started, but I can share a bit about that. In 2020, when COVID was a thing, everybody was shopping online. E-commerce was kind of at the peak. It had grown like 10 years. There's that crazy Shopify chart. If you saw, it's like what the expectations was and what the reality was. And it had its bounce back and its reckoning, but at the time it was pretty crazy. And we realized that when you wanted to buy the most important things in your life, those big purchases, for me, a bicycle or an espresso machine, other people, it may be a dress or a fridge, I don't know, whatever big purchase. It's really hard to just like hit add to cart on a $1,500, $2,000 item or more. And so we were trying to really figure out, how do we solve this problem where you've got businesses that are just not set up for e-commerce? How do they sell online? And more often than not, it was that human to human interaction. And so we played around with a combination of intercom, Calendly, and FaceTime to do virtual appointments. And we realized that we could help teams sell basically anything online, including really expensive like prom dresses. That's actually where we started. That was the why for Withe at the beginning. I can go through a number of stories on why that did not work, but and how we got to where we are today. But that's how we started.
That's so interesting. It actually brings up a story from my past. Before starting Spring Studio, I ran a custom furniture shop, and we sold exclusively online, exclusively e-commerce, direct to consumer. We didn't sell to wholesalers. We didn't even sell to retailers. We just went straight to the consumer. which was really easy. But to your point, the most challenging part for us was convincing somebody to drop $2,500 on a bed frame, sight unseen, without being able to go like check it out, make sure the quality is there. So we had to put a ton of effort into building that trust and sharing why this piece of furniture is better than X, Y, and Z offerings that you can actually go into the store and check out. So definitely a challenge for us, and one that I don't think we ever really solved perfectly. It was always just like, to your point, like there had to be a human element to like not necessarily convince somebody that this was worth purchasing, but more so just like build that trust and make sure that they know that won't be left high and dry if something does go wrong.
So I was just gonna say I had to recently make some purchases like that, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. It was like my first time purchasing something that was like $1,200 online. I think it was a little more, and it was stuff for my house and sight unseen. So I'm seeing pictures. Uh, I don't I don't remember if there was this kind of support that you're talking about, but I was very apprehensive, and I was just sort of left feeling because I'm purchasing from sites that are not they're not well known, right? These are just e-commerce websites that exist online that I found, and was feeling super apprehensive about doing that. And ultimately, when I made the purchase, up until the item arrived, I thought like I'm just going to get an empty box, or it's going to be some tiny chair. It was chairs, tiny chairs, or something like a scam. So totally understand the reason behind starting. Like it makes perfect in my head.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I will say customers, the people who actually used our product in the early days, the customers absolutely loved it. And, we saw an immense drop in returns for businesses, but businesses are like, hey, we could spend $10,000 with you, or we could spend $10,000 on TikTok and guarantee this many new customers. And their whole goal was to eliminate the human interaction for many of them where they could. And so it didn't end up being a great business model, at least as it stood for us. I hope someone else could take that and take it to the moon, as they say. But yeah, for us, we ended up needing to pivot.
Yeah. So walk me through the decision to pivot and where you guys are now, and how you're seeing the next, like, I don't know, maybe the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months play out.
Totally. Well, it's a 3 year story that I'll try and condense for you pretty quick. But the long and short of it is, like I said, customers loved it. Brands had interest, but realistically, it wasn't working. So we did something that I don't recommend any founders do and say, okay, well, we have the solution. Let's go find another problem. Now, that's not the way to build businesses. And we could talk about the many founders that have gone through that maze. Where we've been fortunate enough that it's worked out in our favor so far, but that's not the way I would recommend it, and I would do it a little differently, if I were to start over today. So I interviewed, without exaggeration, I think 200 or 250 people, different sectors, different areas of work, from sales to customer support, call center, everything like that. And we realized that when I talked to software salespeople who had to book demos to meet someone before they could sell their product, when I explained to them that our product says, hey, you can chat with a real person on your website right now, they were blown away. And so that's really where we pivoted to it. We thought about customer support, but it wasn't revenue generating for the business. And we thought there'd be more interest in sales. We had a ton of interest from SDRs and BDRs whose like whole goal is to book meetings with their AEs. They're incentivized to actually do that. And so we were like, cool, what do we need to do this? Well, let's hook into HubSpot. Let's hook into Salesforce. Let's do some qualification. So it's not any any lead that lands on your site. They've got to be qualified to some degree. But if you're seeing no-show rates in your booked demos up to 50%, imagine you had 50% more meetings. Also, if you've got like a BDR who's available, why wait a week to chat with a customer when you can chat with them today? So that's really where we focused. We were all in the sales enablement game. I was really a student of the game. It was a lot of fun. Met some really interesting folks who I learned a lot from, including how we should have done things totally differently from day one, but that's all right. Um, we were growing in that space. We were doing about 100 calls a month for our customers when we were coming up against a couple of problems. One, enterprise sales teams, the idea of throwing a widget on their site to like change the entire way they do sales. They were not like jumping at the bit to do that. You know, they've invested in all these tools and technologies. And also, who owns the website? Is it marketing? Is it sales? You get buy-in on one, you don't get buy-in on the other. We were coming up against some problems, and at the same time, not problems that are unheard of for founders. We deal with problems every day, but at the same time, my co-founder and I were out for lunch at a taco shop here in Vancouver, and end up chatting with the table next to us, and it's full of recruiters. And we don't really actually end up talking much about work aside from we do a startup, you're in recruiting, but it was more about Vancouver, coffee shops, taco shops, what to order, that kind of thing. I asked for the guy's email, and I was like, "Hey, give me your email. I'll give you some recommendations," because they had just moved to Vancouver on where to go, what to do. And in every email I was sending, even if it wasn't for business, I'd have a one-liner: "Hey, this is what Withe does." And to this day, that original software is on our site. I turned it off for this meeting, but where you can click a button and get in an instant video call with me. So I send this guy an email. About a week later, I'm walking to the office, which is really just my co-founder's apartment. And I get a notification. The guy I met from the taco shop is calling in through Withe, through our platform. Literally just clicks on me waving at him on the website. And I answer it, and I apologize for swearing, but I'm like, "Hey man, good to see you." And he's like, "Oh shit," and like hangs up. And then he calls me because my phone number is in my signature, and he's like, "Daniel, I didn't realize your product worked," which is like what every founder wants to hear, you know? And I'm like, "Yeah, man, thanks." He's like, "No, you don't understand." He's like, "I'm in a Microsoft Teams meeting with 30 coworkers, and my VP wants a demo right now." I'm like, I don't even know what you do, you know? Like, okay, sure. Like, have him call. He's like, "No, you gotta join this meeting." Anyways, to make a long story short, they were a Fortune 1000 staffing company, staffing for teams, like global teams that you would heard of, big hotel brands, big retailers, that kind of thing. And they had a huge problem that we were seeing in sales. But if you thought it was bad in sales for no-show rates, imagine booking interviews with candidates making $15 an hour. They got to put food on the table. They're not waiting 2 or 3 weeks for an interview. So we did a test for one of their hotel brands, and instead of doing 100 calls in a month across a handful of clients, we did 300 interviews in 2 hours. And it was like, oh, there's something here. I'm not in recruitment, or I wasn't in recruitment at the time. I had no idea how big this problem was, but that's how we got pulled into this industry.
What a story. Oh, wow. I guess for me, I'd love to kind of get into, so we talked through the idea and how you got here, but would love to know what your development process was like. Can you walk us through that? What were some of the challenges you faced while developing?
In terms of developing a product?
Yeah.
So I'm really fortunate. My co-founder and CTO has been my best friend since the first day of high school. We never really knew we were going to build a company together, but it just so happened we were living together. And then, anyways, this problem came to be in the e-commerce space, and I was like, "Hey man, what do you think we should do?" He's like, "Oh, I could just do that." And so I got really lucky. So I have an incredible co-founder who built our MVP from the ground up, who I was able to demo that with investors and with clients, I won't say right away, but as soon as we were able to get it to life there. And so the development process, from a technical perspective was great. It wasn't on me. And then, having a technical co-founder to help kind of build the team when we had the chance to do that, has made it a much better process that I know a lot of founders have struggled through, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. What about, it sounds like it was super smooth, which is like phenomenal, more than anyone can ask for, especially as a non-technical founder, which I guess you are, and your partner's the technical side. What about challenges? Were there was it just smooth sailing the whole time, or did you guys face like some daunting, treacherous challenges along the way? Or
Oh yeah.
How was that for you guys?
So when we started, we were utilizing WebRTC, which is the protocol for in-browser video. And it had just started to get good, like really like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was not good. It went from being accepted on like, I don't know, something like 80% of web experiences to like 96, and that 16% was like huge. But we would freak out. Like I'd be on a call with an investor, for example, when we're doing the sales thing, and I straight up would be like, "Hey, you think this sounds cool. Let's pause here, go to our website, call me. And in the meantime, I'm crossing my fingers being like, they better not be using this browser. They better not be using this device when they
Right.
call in.
Yeah.
Is it going to connect? That kind of thing. So there were absolutely some technical challenges from even like a technology standpoint, what we were using, will it actually work? And then B, from like a stability perspective, like when we were putting widgets on people's sites, you want it to be the last thing to load so you don't affect their SEO and their load times or anything like that. But you also need it to show up. And so there's all this stuff that we were dealing with. But thankfully, we're in a little bit more of a stable place there. But hell, even yesterday, you might have seen my tweet, Tristan. I saw you just followed me. We went to upgrade our database before one of our biggest events to date, and it should have just been the simplest thing, like, hey, add more, pay for a higher tier, make sure there's no problems. Then all of a production's down. Like, what the hell? Yeah. So no, not without its problems for sure.
All good and fun, man. All good and fun right there. That's why I messaged you. I reached out just because Tristan and I chatted about that, and we figured that you're probably dealing and juggling with 1,000 things. So we were, totally okay with postponing this, but really appreciate your time. Hopefully downtime is over and now
we're good.
Back up again.
All back up and everything's sorted. Shout out to the support team at Supabase and my co-founder. So yeah,
it's awesome.
Nice,
good stuff, man.
Nice. Shout out to them. So speaking on about product and building the product, there's typically what we found is there's this like really important design phase. And sometimes when you're moving really fast, especially at a startup, oftentimes we kind of have to consolidate that design phase quite a bit. Can you walk me through like maybe the initial like MVP version and how you guys were thinking about design from an early, like in the very, very beginning?
Oh, it looked horrible, but yes. So I'd say two things. One, I mean, design is so important. But two, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you put out, then you didn't ship it fast enough. I really do believe in that. Like, you got to get out there and you got to get it done. We focused on making it as simple as possible, but man, was it ugly. Like, it's pretty embarrassing to look back on. And, the importance of design is huge, especially in most cases for startup founders, it's user experience. We have two separate users. We've got the hiring manager, right, who's going to be meeting candidates. They need it to be simple, streamlined information. Who am I chatting with? What is this experience like? Can I get all of the information I need? But more importantly for us anyways, is the candidate experience. You're applying for a job. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced, I don't want to call it any big companies, but I'm sure we've all experienced applying to some massive company and going through 30 steps and retyping our resume and uploading this, whatever. It's horrible. So how do we balance the needs and the expectations of the candidate who we want to blow away? Like, because candidate experience is so important. They have a good experience applying to your role. More likely than not, they're going to accept that than having to like go through pages and loading and whatever.
Oh, I remember that.
And how do we, so like, how do we balance those expectations and create a great, smooth experience for both sides? So, I mean, design from like a UX perspective is just so critical. But, as we started out, it's like, okay, how do we just make it work? Right. All right. Now that it works, let's try and smooth the process a bit. And so we've been fortunate enough to have some great designers in house who focus on accessibility, and also to work with the Spring Studios team to like get there faster, because there's always more to be done. Yeah.
Couldn't be truer right there. Anyone that has a SaaS platform knows that design is never ending. I just have one quick question to piggyback off this. You guys how did you take care of UX initially? You said you had some sort of in-house team or freelancer, or did you just let the devs just handle the UX side of things in the very beginning?
Yeah, at the very beginning, it was just my co-founder and I. Like, I would try and mock things up horribly in Figma more often than not. Use Google Slides and like shapes, like, hey, it should kind of look like this. And then he would kind of go through it. And one of our first hires, actually, she had been she was an occupational therapist for years. Wanted to get more into web accessibility, and when she joined, she had gotten certifications with WCAG guidelines and so on. And I think one of the biggest wins for us, and this was something that I cared about just from a candidate experience perspective, but one of the biggest wins for us is focusing on accessibility first and letting UX come after. Because once you focus on accessibility, you know it works, and you know it works for the most amount of people possible. And then can you design around that to make it a really beautiful experience as well, beautiful and effective? And so I think that was probably the biggest win. So early on, it was just like, hey, I'm going to mock things up literally in Google Slides. And like my co-founder would bring that to life as best he could. And then once we had a few more resources, focusing on accessibility and making that a smooth process for both types of users, right?
So would you say that the accessibility part, focusing on accessibility, was probably the biggest design decision that you guys have made, that has made the most significant difference on the platform? Like, is that safe to say?
I would say so. And then, as a software product grows, it gets more and more complicated, right? And so you can design as simple as possible. And then you've got, 30 feature requests you start implementing, and that simple design doesn't work anymore. So it's not just about, oh, you design it once and you kind of forget about it, you move forward. It's often thinking about, okay, well, how does this all play together, right? Like, what's the link here? And you can't have one page that looks amazing and another page that doesn't look great. And so, in our experience also working with Spring Studio, it's like, okay, what are the flows that we want to fix, and what does that all touch? So when a candidate goes and they see a great experience halfway through, they can't turn around into a totally different looking experience. So design is so much better than or so much bigger than what's the infographic on the page, or what's the button looking like. It's like, in every interaction on that page, how does the user actually experience that?
Such key statements right there. Absolutely. Like 100%. I wish we could shout that out to the entire world.
Clip
Totally.
it. Clip
Clip
it.
it.
Clip it.
That's awesome. So what, thinking back to like your journey and coming at this with hindsight, like knowing that, all right, here's some of the pitfalls we went through. Here's some of the challenges we overcame. Can you think of any specific advice that you'd give to other founders, like just starting out, like designing that MVP that you talked about? Like, you're shipping too late if you're shipping something that you're actually proud of, right? Like,
Yeah, totally.
like just
Clip
get
it.
something out there. But besides that, anything else that you can think of that other founders should consider? Yeah.
I've got so many, but I'd say the most important takeaway is customer discovery interviews. Just customer discovery interviews. Don't talk about your product. Don't talk about your idea. Understand the problem. Find a problem. Understand the problem. Don't bring up your solution. Just talk to as many potential customers as possible without bringing up what you do, and figure out what their issues are. And if you solve a real problem, nothing else really matters. Obviously, it's got to be a problem people want to pay to solve. It's going to be painful enough that they want to pay to solve, and there's not alternatives that they're just not using. But yeah, I would say interview potential customers on who you're thinking about, understand their problems, and that's really it. And then don't get stuck on a solution. So many founders, they have this insight, and they're like, oh my God, I've had this epiphany. I'm going to do this. And they lock in, and it's great to be focused on what you're doing, but I'm not going to say you're never, but you're almost never right on your first shot. I mean, hey, we're still not right on our third shot, and we're constantly figuring out what works. You're probably wrong in what your initial thesis is. So talk to customers, talk to potential customers, talk to your current customers, and build for what their actual problems are.
That's awesome. Any frameworks you like to follow when talking to potential customers? Like, again, taking a step back, you don't have a product yet. You're just trying to unearth some pain points and really get to know this customer base at a deep level. Obviously, like things like leading questions might not be the best way to go about it. Any specific questions that you like to ask, or frameworks that you like to follow?
The Mom Test. I'm sure we've all read it. If you haven't, I highly recommend The Mom Test. It's a book that's super, super short. You can get an ebook. You can read it in like 20 minutes, but you should read it like 100 times. It's essentially, you don't want, anything you tell your mom that you're building, she's going to be like, oh, that sounds amazing. Like, that's so great. How do you take away that excitement and really just focus on what the key problem is? And is this something that you build for? Because nobody maybe this is a Canadian context, I don't know, but nobody wants to be rude and be like, oh, that's never going to work, right? And you have to have some sort of like hard nose to say, I know there's something here, and you can go through that. But nobody wants to give you critical feedback, and that's actually all you need as an early stage startup founder. And so you got to have some conviction in where you're working, but really taking away the pride, the ego, the idea from it, and focusing on the problem. So even your mom would give you critical feedback on what you're doing. That's really, I think, the true beauty in startup building. I think the most successful founders, and I'm not even counting myself as one of them, but I think that's what they're doing, and that's what we'd like to do as well.
That's amazing. Love that advice right there.
Love it. So what about you personally? Maybe we could take a quick step back. Have you always been an entrepreneur, a founder? Like, has this always just kind of come natural to you, or did you move away from, I don't know, a big boy job, as they say?
Yeah. So, my parents were small business owners. So I think it's always kind of been in me, like familially. But no, for me, I wanted to be the prime minister when I was a kid. So I went to Ottawa, the capital of Canada, studied politics, and realized very quickly that politics was not for me. So glad I left that. I actually dropped out of university to join a MarTech startup, a marketing technology startup that came out of Hootsuite, which is one of the biggest social media management platforms out there, and definitely like a darling company here in Vancouver. Um, so I was there 8 years, and I played every role. And I was there kind of pre-revenue and pre-product, really, to working with some of the world's largest brands like Adobe, Dell, Okta, Slack, Sotheby's Global, like you name it. We've done some work with them, or I had done work with them there, and that was going from literally nothing. So I had done, the business development hat, I had done the product management hat, I've done the account management hat. And, one of the beautiful things, excuse me, about working in a startup that gives you the freedom to really try and fail and figure out what works for you. I had one employer for 8 years, but I had probably 8 careers, right? And that was really beautiful for me to figure out what the hell I'm good at, what I'm terrible at, and what I want to do. I always had an idea when I realized I was not going to be the prime minister that I'd like to start my own business one day, but I had no idea what the hell it would be. And so working in early stage, a startup that allowed me to fail and figure out new things and was successful enough to grow and see what that looks like. That was really my transition. So yeah, I did work in a relative big boy job beforehand, but yeah.
Love it, man.
That's amazing. It almost sounds like you got paid to go to school, right? You got paid to
100%.
go try out 8 different career options, basically, all for one company. But
Totally.
Invaluable.
Exactly.
That's the best kind of experience. I kind of took that same route. I did work for a Fortune 500 company, and then went and worked for some startups, and absolutely fell in love with just, I don't know, the grind or whatever, just building, scaling things. I mean, it wasn't obviously my startup, but I got to experience different roles and see it play out at scale in front of me. So I loved it too.
look at you guys with the big boy jobs. I've never had one.
Jealous.
I've always just started my own thing.
You're not missing out.
I was the 12-year-old skateboarder who realized very quickly that I couldn't skate, couldn't hang with the big guys. So I'm like, all right, what do I do? Like, I'll start the skate company and I'll sponsor you guys, and I'll grab a video camera and I'll film you, and we'll sell the tapes, we'll sell the shirts.
Unreal.
And that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, and I haven't looked back since.
I love it.
So cool.
Yeah,
That's great.
Sweet, man. I know we're coming up at time. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about you personally, or about Withe and the company that you're building?
That is a great question. I think I'd like to say that I'm here for all founders. So reach out if you're a founder, you got questions. Taking that step is difficult, but it's important. Don't wait for that epiphany. Just like, you don't have to quit your job today and start working on your startup, but you can definitely start working on it in the 5 to 9. So reach out if you're building and you have any questions. And then, hey, if you know any seasonal or volume hiring teams, not to plug, but hit me up. We'd love to help them hire for that. So there you go.
That's amazing. Where can listeners find you? LinkedIn, Twitter?
LinkedIn, Twitter. They can hit me up at daniel@withe.co. That's WITHE.co. And if I'm online, you can see me waving at you. Just get an instant video call. Say what's up.
It's the
Cool.
best feature I've seen on a site in a long time, by the way.
Yep.
I thought it was just a normal chatbot, right? I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Daniel's in the bottom corner there. Interesting. I wonder what happens if yeah, it's probably just a chatbot. I haven't clicked it yet. But yeah,
Well,
if anybody wants to jump on a quick call with you.
going back to design, sorry, I know we're after the fact. I don't know if you want to throw this in or not, but going back to design, our very first iteration, click to instant video. Like it literally was click and you are in a call. And that was great, but nobody was expecting that. Nobody wanted to do that. And so we actually learned that the fastest way to get someone on video call was the worst way, because as soon as they were in a call, they were like, what the hell is going on? It's like Omegle or whatever, chat roulette. It's like, whoa, someone's right there. So we're like, okay, how do we make it fast, but also prepare people that they actually are getting on a call? So there's a bit of a form, there's like a pre-screen now. And so I think that's what some of the design lessons we learned is like, the fastest way is not often the best way. So how do you kind of hold the user's hand through that process? So anyways, late insight for you.
Super well said. I mean, adding just a little bit of friction can actually be really, really impactful from a design perspective and from a business perspective. Like you look at, I would imagine if you were to go back and look at all the analytics, it's like we got tons of people clicking and then starting a video only to drop off a half a second later because they were so surprised, right? So adding a little bit of friction will not only encourage, like get the time spent in the video will ideally go up, but also like the churn and the drop off will ideally go down just by adding a little bit of friction. So yeah, nice recognition there.
Thank you. There's actually a data point. Again, it's like 4 years old now, so I'm going to be butchering it a bit. But one of the best things we ever added was a button to start the call with your video off, because everybody, when they realized that they didn't have to be seen right away, they would do that. So we had so many people start the call with the video off, and as soon as they saw a real human with the video on the other end, they turned it on like 98% of the time.
Sure.
But they just didn't want to be watched without knowing who the hell was there. But they saw you and they're like, oh, right, real human, video on, now we can have a conversation.
Nice.
Interesting.
Nice move.
That's playing up on a lot of human like brain activity that, is on another level of business, right? Just like how humans interact with each other, like jumping on a video call with the video on immediately without being warned would make me feel uncomfortable because who's looking at me, who's on the other side, I'm out. So that's very interesting.
Speaking of being out, Daniel, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with us and hanging out. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
My
man.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
Daniel.
you guys. Cool.
Of course, dude.
Take care.
See you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.